Hello, and welcome to this episode of Haverin About. I am so delighted today to introduce you to another one of my favorite reads, Maria Sukhareva. I wanted to talk with Maria because she goes by a brand of AI Realist, and that is really why I enjoy her writing, because she knows so much at a deep technical subject matter level, and yet she makes it very accessible. She's able to cross the boundaries in your writing. And so I enjoy that very much, Maria. So welcome to you. Welcome to our viewers and listeners. And maybe, Maria, I could start by asking you to just introduce yourself and explain a little bit about your background.
Thank you very much for such a nice introduction. I'm actually even a bit embarrassed now because of hearing so many nice words towards me and towards the AI Realist. That's really what makes my writing and my work rewarding. Yes, so towards the introduction of myself, many years ago in 2003, I started as a linguist, studying linguistics in a university. And while I really like linguistics, my other major was translation, and translation is really not my cup of tea. I think it's a very complex job, very difficult job, but also it's a job that bit puts you in a shadow and is somewhat really not exactly my type of activity that I would see myself for years doing. And I always actually liked computers, and I liked math and artificial intelligence. Even back then, artificial intelligence existed for many, many, many decades before. I mean, it was a slightly different type of artificial intelligence back then. A lot of this ontologies, like neurosymbolic stuff too, was back then, or that
Neuro-Linguistic
kind of
Programming, and yes.
Yeah, that's what I frequently get confused when I say
Yeah.
I'm like an LP, and they're like, "Are you doing Neuro-Linguistic Programming?" No, it's like natural language processing. It's a different thing. But so then I was basically I got a scholarship from German government to study in a German university in Saarland, and I moved to Germany and started studying computational linguistics.
Do you mind if I ask, where did you grow up? Where were you born and grew up in the first place?
I grew up in the polar north of Russia. So on the coast of the Arctic Ocean, the city is called Arkhangelsk. It was built in 16th century as a place for punishment and suffering from the Tsar. So basically he was sending criminals there and people who just didn't like to live there and suffer. And this city eventually grew into an industrial center of the north because there are many resources, many things that actually like an industrial country could profit from. So it became a fairly large polar city with many things happening there. But of course, it's extreme weather conditions, minus 40, minus 30 in winter. I mean, you have like 52 days of vacations a year. Transportation every 2 years and many other benefits just like for living there. So that's kind of the type of living we are used to.
Now I know why you're comfortable visiting your family in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Yes, that's absolutely right. I don't think like St. Paul is even like
anyway, back to your education in Germany, but thank you for that.
So basically then I did the computational linguistics. I graduated from this master's program. Then I started working in research. So basically I started my PhD in Frankfurt. Unfortunately, never finished it. Though it was very, very close. I had lots of publications, but life went a different way and I switched to industry. During my research career, I was working with machine translation and historical languages, which many people actually found very confusing back then, because what machine translation can you have for Middle Low German and Middle High German? I was working back then a lot with historical texts, and historical texts are what? Well, there was only one text basically that existed everywhere. It was Bible. So yeah, I was literally had a huge corpus of Bibles, like huge collection of Bibles, and I was doing machine translation from translating like from Middle Low German to High German and so on, between different Bible versions. However, it might sound irrelevant, but in fact, machine translation and all these approaches that we had, well, they basically were the founding of the theory behind large language models. So we were doing language modeling. I mean, language modeling comes from machine translation. So we started as Ngram language models. Then we moved towards neural language models. First, there were recurrent neural language models like LSTMs and so on. That's where attention mechanism appeared. So, like the one that was famous. But then at some point, someone like the famous paper "Attention is all you need" realized that attention might actually be all you need, and what you don't need is the recurrency that was coming from those LSTMs. And they just kept the attention, and that's what transformer models were.
Yeah.
And then we had the transformers. They lived for a while. So we did. By that time, I already moved to BMW. I was doing machine translation for automotive domain. So I was training these models because back then there were not many off-the-shelf domain-specific machine translators. So I had a DGX station with 16 GPUs under my desk. Nobody really wanted to use it back then except for me. So I was lucky
You
to
got to
have
play
it
with all the
all.
cool toys.
Yes, it was kind of funny in BMW because I was in the department, NLP was very small. I mean, NLP, now everyone is an AI expert and everyone knows everything about large language models. And back then, and when I started 2018, NLP group was just founded in BMW and there were 4 people. And 4 people is not enough to have a department. So they didn't know where to put us. So they put us into blockchain because whatever, I guess. Blockchain was massive back then. It was 22 people or something doing blockchain. And that's why we got the DGX station with Nvidia GPUs, because blockchain, obviously GPUs. So they bought the stations in BMW, and the blockchain team actually didn't do anything with them. They didn't have a project. So I was then I'll take them. I had on my card, still maybe I still have them somewhere hanging around, blockchain and NLP. And people, when they would see this card, they were like, "Oh, you're doing blockchain," because everyone knew blockchain, nobody knew NLP. And I was like, I have no idea about blockchain, not a clue. And I really didn't know much about what's happening in blockchain. I'm just don't ask me. But it says blockchain. Well, it's the other one, the NLP
I feel
part.
like blockchain was one of those massively hyped technologies as going to be able to solve everything from commerce to international financial transactions to security across networks, etc. And it was the biggest puff of smoke I've seen in my career, because you're correct. It was one of those things whereby it was so hot that everybody was talking about it, but nobody understood what you could actually do with it. What was the problems it was actually in practice going to solve as opposed to theoretically going to solve? So I have a lot of sympathy for you, but it's, it sounds as though it enabled you to get access at least to the technology that would allow you to start growing your activity and work.
If you're enjoying Haverin About, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps more people find us.
And of course, subscribe so you don't miss the next bit of blethering. You wouldn't want to do that, would you?
Yeah, that was absolutely fun to have these boxes under your table. It was a luxury because now I don't have this. Now we're all on the cloud. And for comparison, I could run training for 2 weeks there, and it would train a massive machine translation model there. And basically, it would cost nothing. I mean, maybe some electricity, but for a corporation like BMW, it wouldn't matter. And obviously, nobody would be counting how much electricity I burn in the building. But now to have the training like this for 2 weeks would cost thousands on the cloud. And then I would simply not be able to do, because I would actually have to explain why I burned 10,000 euros on the cloud by training a model. And this is, so this was really a luxury back then too, that is not really easily accessible nowadays.
Well, there's a lot of people that, when you look at companies like here in the US, there's a number of those companies, whether it's buying capacity from Google, whether it's Nvidia selling their highest end processors, or there's some of the specialty organizations that are out there. I know that my organization has partnered with a number of them, And you're correct. It's incredibly expensive. And when you look at the amount of profit that Nvidia is making, interesting. And when you then sort of look at the interest there is in developing the competitor chips, that raw processing capability is the engine room that is making a lot of these hardware manufacturers. These chip manufacturers were all going bust, trying to develop CPUs for servers and computers. And then suddenly GPUs, it's become a license to print money for a lot of these hardware organizations. So yeah, I think it's fascinating the way that has changed from there. But you're working at BMW. Clearly, they didn't have a clue what to do with you or your work. So what did you do next from there?
Yeah. So, well, in BMW, I was doing machine translation and some chatbots. Back then, chatbots were also popular. And then I moved to Siemens. And in Siemens, they also decided to start NLP projects, like NLP initiatives. So I was also started with the usual NLP use cases. So like sentiment analysis, like usual suspects like classification, whatever we were doing then back then with fine-tuning transformers like BERT and doing this. I think chatbot somehow avoided me back then. But it's so yeah. So and actually nobody like really cared about me much back then when I started because it was like just like NLP something. So I was like in this dark corner of NLP doing some classification for financial domain, some sentiment analysis, and so on. And then suddenly ChatGPT happened, and everyone decided that they need a chatbot. And it didn't happen overnight that we had an avalanche of AI experts. So the first 2-3 months, they were actually like, so who's here actually like heard of this before? And there were not many people. So that was interesting to come from this dark corner of NLP into the spotlight of generative AI. So at some point, we kind of like the NLP people, they got popular. And the NLP people who come from that background, they were immediate. I mean, it's the story of language models. Like it wasn't new for us. We knew the models before. We knew GPT-3. There was Ulither. There was GPT-2, and there was like a bunch of these generative approaches before. And this open domain chatbots, the neural chatbots that like kind of behave in a similar manner as machine translation behaves. So because that's basically what they do, right? Like they get an input and then they need to generate some kind of an output, right? That's a similar idea behind machine translation, only that it doesn't translate, but like kind of like continuous generating, right? So we knew this, and we knew like all the problems with this. So immediately we knew how to make this thing to tell you something mean, to swear at you, how to hack it, and so on. Like it was like quite obvious. I was very skeptical in the beginning, like that it's going to go somewhere. And so when people started coming to me, I was like, yeah, that's good. Let's do this and this, but this will not be possible with these models. But very quickly there was an avalanche of kind of AI experts who probably consulted the bot first before becoming AI experts for their education in the field, and they started.
There are an enormous number of those people out there. I
Exactly.
find, because I write about AI, but I write about it from an applied perspective in terms of like it's any other product, and I've shared with you, I'm one of those enthusiastic skeptics, similar from you, but you've got a technical background. I've got a business, commercial, and healthcare background. And I find it very funny to see all of these people when you look back in their career and how they became instant AI experts 18 months ago.
If you're enjoying Haverin About, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps more people find us.
And of course, subscribe so you don't miss the next bit of blethering. You wouldn't want to do that, would you?
And that's the wonderful thing I love about you is this has been your life. I mean, the through path from your linguistics background into where you are today is extremely clear. And the thing I love about your background is that through line makes complete intellectual sense as to why you understand those fundamental underpinnings of what these transformers are doing. Because you're right. I mean, they're basically taking words, we dump a bunch of words into a context window, and they're trying to sort of like look for patterns, look for associations, and then on the basis of that, predict something that you might want. And obviously the problem with that is I don't know if you've ever heard this old joke about if you gave 10,000 monkeys 10,000 typewriters, give them long enough and you would eventually get the
Oh,
word
yeah, I know
Shakespeare.
this.
Yeah, yeah. And so I feel like that all we've done is we've applied this massive computing power to allow that to occur. So you get this predictive output with lots and lots of loops, in there. My son calls them Markov loops, and because he studies more technically than I am. And so I think that linguistic background that you've got and that translation background that you've got in terms of the fundamentals around translating from those various versions of Bibles is an amazing background compared to some of these IT people who have become AI experts only because it's the latest flavor of technology. And so therefore they've had to study really hard, very fast to try and keep up. So, sorry, that was me flattering you even more. And I
thank you.
apologize for making you blush.
I'm getting red. I mean, one probably cannot see this, but
That's okay. Well, let's pivot a little bit from your background, because I know that you're now doing some very serious strategy work in your work for Siemens, and we won't touch on that because you're not here to represent Siemens. We're talking about you and
right.
AI Realist.
Oh, I need to tell you something.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I'm a Siemens employee, but all views expressed in this podcast are solely my own.
Absolutely. And that stays in, Maria. I promise you that stays in. I'm talking to you as the AI realist. And
this is my legal disclaimer that I'm supposed to say every time I'm doing something like this.
Absolutely. All so
now I'm legally fine.
All views of the contributor are her own and personal. Wonderful. Well, let's talk a little bit about what you see changing in AI right now. And before we do that, I'll do a little insert here. This is Maria's publication, the AI Realist on Substack. And I can strongly recommend that you go and look that up. Maria, do you mind if I put your LinkedIn connection as well for anybody who wants to look up, because it's public? And so I'll add in Maria's LinkedIn profile so that if you want to learn a little bit more about what she's doing, either professionally or more importantly, go subscribe to the AI Realist. It will be such a great read for you. Some of Maria's work is very technical, but some of it is very insightful about just what's going on and how do you cut through the marketing fluff and hype. So with that said, Maria, now I've done a small advert for you. What is it that is changing right now in AI in terms of both at a commercial industrial level, but also in what you write about? You write a lot about what's happening for the general utility user of AI tools out there in the world.